Hello everyone, welcome to Carnivorous Plants Hub. I'm excited to have you today. Today I'm going to be showing you how I repot my Venus flytraps and also how I repot this Cephalotus. I'll also be giving you some care tips along the way, some generalized stuff. If you need more in-depth care tips, I got a couple videos for that. Check out the description and I can talk about more specific videos that I have that's regarding care instructions for Venus flytraps or a Cephalotus. So today it'll be kind of generalized while I'll be kind of talking about some care while I'm repotting these, and I'll be giving some pretty specific instructions about repotting itself. But if you need a bigger overall, more detailed picture of care for a Venus flytrap or Cephalotus, check out the description because I got both of those there. If you have been around my channel long enough, you've probably seen this sort of unusual plant that I have here, or this unusual setup of two plants that I have here. I have a typical Venus flytrap growing in the same pot as my Cephalotus here, or as I guess this is a typical Cephalotus too, because the unexpected guest in this pot was the Cephalotus. So I have a video kind of explaining how everything went down and kind of what happened here and why this all happened. It was an accident. I don't really understand how the Cephalotus got in this pot, but if you want to find more out about that, check out the video in the description. I'm not going to go into that too much today. Today we're really focusing on pulling both of these plants out and repotting them, mostly because the care instructions for these are just a little bit different, even though as you can see they've done a pretty good job growing together. I'm a little concerned about the Cephalotus because the pictures haven't been opening. As you can see right here, this picture really should be open. See that there, kind of like this one is back here. That one probably needs to be open even a little more, but I think what's happening is that the Venus flytraps typically need a little bit more water than Cephalotus, and I think I've been overwatering this plant just a little bit for the Cephalotus sake. The Venus flytrap is doing awesome. It's really thriving. It's just a typical, but it's got some really nice traps on it now. It's getting bigger, and you can see I got a lot of new growth coming in. So the flytrap itself is doing really, really well. So it's kind of a bummer to have to repot it. I always hate repotting when plants are doing well and the substrate seems to be healthy and everything is doing great, but this one just needs to be repotted. I'm worried that they're not going to grow well together. I'm worried that this Cephalotus from a long-term perspective isn't going to have great health because I just think it's getting a little too much water. With Cephalotus plants, sometimes too much water and not enough water will give some of the same symptoms, and that can be that lid staying closed. That can be a symptom of too much water and not enough water. I'm pretty certain that we're not going down the not enough water route because I've been giving it enough water to support the Venus flytrap at least. So I think what's best for this is just to make sure that we separate these two, get them growing in their own planters so that we can make sure that they're getting the type of care that they need for their specific type of plant. Alright, I'm really excited to pull these out of here. I'm not really sure what to expect for sure. I'm not sure if these roots have grown separate or if they're going to be grown together and intertwined. We could potentially have a mess on our hands here, but real quick before we dig into this and I pull these plants out of here, check this out so you can see how you can get your hands on a Venus flytrap or Cephalotus plant of your own. I'm super pumped about teaming up with California Carnivorous. They're one of the most experienced and knowledgeable carnivorous plant nurseries in the entire world. They have a massive selection year-round of all types of carnivorous plants. There will definitely be something in their nursery you fall in love with. On top of that, they've also been generous enough to offer my viewers an exclusive 10% discount on their order when they enter CP Hub at checkout. That's CP Hub. Head on over and pick out yourself a new carnivorous plant to add to your collection. You know you deserve it. Let's go ahead and get back to the video. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. Thanks so much for listening to that first of all. I actually really appreciate it. So let's go ahead and first talk about repotting a Venus flytrap. One of the best times to repot a Venus flytrap is actually close to now. We're sort of at the end of the dormancy period. Today's March 1st. So we're getting closer to the end of dormancy. These plants are going to be starting to come out of dormancy probably sometime in March or April depending on the weather. So right now is actually a really good time, either mid-dormancy or toward the end of dormancy, closer to the beginning of the growing season, is a really good time to pull these out. When we're talking about Cephalotus, don't worry about it too much because they don't go through dormancy periods, so they can actually be repotted really whenever you want to. If you do have a colder season, their growth does tend to die back just a little bit and they won't grow quite as much as they do during the normal height of a growing season. So in the middle of winter or toward the end of winter, probably also about the same time is good for repotting a Cephalotus. Although they can be grown year-round in same conditions, so really whenever you want to repot a Cephalotus is a good time to do that. Alright, so let's go ahead. I'm going to try to pull this plant out while I have this here. You want to be as delicate as you can with these plants, obviously when you're pulling them out of their planter. However, Venus flytraps, typically a good pro tip, I do like to have an insect put into all of these traps so that they're closed and not open, because it's really better for the plant if you don't close any traps while you're doing this. However, it probably won't kill the plant, and it is kind of inevitable that you'll probably close some traps while you're repotting, which is why it's kind of a good tip. I just don't have any insects right now. I need to go to the store and get some crickets or some mealworms. If I had them right now, I probably would go ahead and put one in each of these just so they had some insects in there, they were closed, and they wouldn't worry about being closed. But since I don't have any right now, I'm gonna go ahead and just go with this process. I'm really eager to get these plants out of here to see if their roots intertwined with each other, or if we have a situation where they've actually grown separate. So let's go ahead and get in here. So I'm gonna go ahead and push this together a little bit just to kind of loosen up all this soil. The nice thing about this peat moss is that I waited until it was a little dry, so when it comes out it should kind of just clump right off, which is really nice. Sometimes with sphagnum moss you got a little more work to untangle the roots, but with this peat moss mix it's actually really nice because it kind of just chunks right off. So let's go ahead and dig in here and get this plant out. So as you can see, I decided to do a little digging on this first. So you can see I've got it down a little bit. I wasn't able to quite get under it like I wanted to, but now you can see that I'm getting under it there just a little bit. So now I'm gonna go ahead and try to dig in there and see if I can pull these guys out. Alright, so we got the Venus flytrap out. So there's a pretty good example of why. See, I got a little bit of dirt coming up on the plant and it actually closed all the traps. So that's a good example of why you may want to close the traps up with some live insects first. So there's the flytrap, I got that out. And kind of the same thing happened with the Cephalotus. So I'll probably, when I'm done repotting these, I'll probably spray them down pretty good so we can get some of that dirt off. But you can see the Cephalotus here has the root system, and then it has the two. There's a little baby plant over here, you can see. Little baby one over here, and then the kind of the main one here. So they're all still connected. I'm gonna plant them in the pot together, connected, instead of separating them, just because I think they're kind of small to remove. So I'll put these all kind of in the new planter together. Okay, let's talk about soil real quick. I have my new soil here that I'm going to use. This is about 50% peat moss, 30% silica, or 30% perlite, and then about 20% of a sand and glass mix. Real quick, let's talk about water since we're on the subject of what we're putting in the pot here. Make sure you have distilled water. You want to make sure that your water doesn't have any dissolved solids in it. Make sure it's either distilled water, rainwater, reverse osmosis water. Even if you have rainwater, you want to make sure and use one of these guys. This is a TDS meter. They're actually pretty cheap. You can get them for like 10 bucks on Amazon. And this will tell you if your water has any dissolved solids in it. So if you're using rainwater, test it with this first. If you're getting distilled water at the grocery store, it's like $1 a gallon. You can use that. That works really, really well. So just make sure that you're using water that doesn't have any dissolved solids in it, like bottled water, tap water. All that stuff is really, really bad for your carnivorous plant. Venus flytrap or Cephalotus, they are both the same in that manner. This mix will work really good with the Cephalotus and the Venus flytrap, so that's something to be considered, that it's a good mix for both. As you could see, they were both growing in basically the same mix, and they were both pretty healthy and doing well, so good mix for them. Alright, so today what we're going to do is we're going to put these in some plastic planters here. You can see I have this terracotta color planter. It is not terracotta, this is 100% plastic. So make sure you're getting something plastic. Terracotta is not good because it absorbs a lot of water out of the soil, but also terracotta can leach a lot of nutrients and minerals into the soil. So you don't want to use a terracotta planter. They can actually poison your Venus flytrap. It's not good for it. You want to stay away from any type of clay. Clay is okay as long as it has the glazing on it, but you want to be careful because sometimes those glazings are made out of kind of bad chemicals for Venus flytraps. So I would probably avoid any type of clay or terracotta, and I would go with something that's just plastic. You also want to make sure that it's something that has pretty good drainage on the bottom. The Venus flytraps do not like sitting in water all the time. They really like to go a little bit dry in between waterings, and it's impossible to do that when you have a planter that doesn't have proper drainage. I also really like to water these from a tray and not from the top, and having the holes in the bottom is required if you want to water a Venus flytrap from the tray. So it's really important for a Venus flytrap not to be, even though they're a bog plant, A lot of people kind of construe that for thinking that these actually need to be sitting in water all the time, and it could not be any further from the truth. You do not want a Venus flytrap sitting in water all the time. The only exception to that is if you're in the middle of summer and it's like 95 degrees out and the water is going away about as fast as you can keep up with it, then you do want to keep water in your tray all the time. But as soon as it gets a little bit colder, a little bit chillier, Venus flytraps are really susceptible to rot, crown rot and root rot, so you want to make sure that you have good drainage and you're letting them get a little bit dry in between waterings. First thing you want to do is you want to take a paper towel, just a piece of a paper towel like so, and you want to put it in the bottom of your planter. And the reason you want to do this is because it actually makes sure that there's no separation between your soil and the bottom, and it also makes sure that the paper towel won't let any of your holes get clogged, and it will assure that your soil and this paper towel continue to wick up water. And actually this is probably just a little too big. I'm going to break this off just a little bit because I don't want to. So let's go ahead and start filling here. To start filling your planter, you're going to want to fill it up to about probably here, maybe a little under half, and then we're going to pack it down pretty good. So you can see there we're just a little under half there. So what you want to do is for this first layer that you put in, you want to make sure that it's packed down pretty good. Not super compact. You don't want to pack it down so that it's impossible to break up, but this bottom part you want it to be a little more compact just to make sure that we don't have any holes down here in the bottom, and it'll actually make sure that the water continues to get wicked up from the bottom of your planter up to the top where the roots are going to be. The roots are going to be kind of at the top here to start, and they will eventually grow down. That's also a good reason why you want to have a plastic planter that's probably at least 4 to 6 inches deep minimum. The deeper the better, because those roots really like to grow straight down. So we're going to pack this top part down, and then for the next part we're going to go ahead and pack it down a little bit, but not quite that much, and leave it a little bit loose for the plant to sit in. There we go. So you can see the little bit of glass in there. So yeah, there we go. So we got this filled up to the top. I've packed it down a little bit, but not super tight. You just want to make sure that it stays compact enough so that there's not a whole bunch of holes and gaps in here. So the next thing we're going to do, you want to use like a screwdriver or a pen or something. I'm just going to use my finger for this purpose because I don't have anything sitting around right here. And you're just going to make a hole in your planter that goes pretty deep as you can get it. There we go. And the purpose of that is really just to make sure that these roots, as you can see here, I've kind of washed these roots off a little bit, rinsed them a little so they got off some of that older stuff off there. And this is just to help these roots be able to grow straight down. Now when you put this into your planter, you want to make sure that all the roots go straight down into that hole. If you have your pen or whatever, you can help push those down just a little bit. And you want this to go into the ground up until about the point of where these are starting to come out. So just the top of that rhizome. Right about where the growths are starting. There we go. Now you can see, if you look under the plant right there, you can see that it's right about to where that growth point is popping up. That's about where you want to plant it up. So you don't want it to be too high. You want to be able to see just a little bit of the white of that rhizome. You don't want it to be too low where the rhizome is sticking completely out. The reason you don't want the rhizome to be too far under is because they are subject to rot. And if it sits under too far and is constantly covered in that water, you will subject it to a little bit of crown rot. This way the rhizome gets a little bit of extra airflow, and it tends to keep a healthier plant when they have a little bit of extra airflow, as opposed to it being too far under the ground. Alright, one of the last steps in this process is, even though I typically will tray water my Venus flytrap, you're going to want to do a top watering of this. The main reason is because right now we have a hole right here, and there's a gap, and the substrate's not touching the roots very well. So when we pour this water in here, what will happen is the substrate will kind of collapse around that hole, and any holes or air pockets that we have in here, this top watering should do a pretty good job of eliminating those. So I kind of like to get, you see how it's dropping down a little bit? In some cases, if it's too much, you might even need to add a little extra substrate there at the end. But this one looks like it's doing just fine. So it lowered a little bit, but not enough to where I'm concerned. I like it right there. That looks pretty good. Make sure and put a tray under your planter, because the water will come out the bottom and you'll have a giant mess on your hand. So there we go. So the Venus flytrap is mostly done here in terms of repotting. Now I know it looks kind of pathetic. You'll see that even the ones that are the new growths here are kind of tilting over a little bit. That's perfectly normal. These plants do tend to go through a repotting shock when you repot them. That's why you want to do it at the end of the growing season, so you don't have a whole lot of brand new growth here that's falling. I didn't put this one through dormancy this year, but you absolutely should. There's a video in the description that talks 100% about dormancy. I'm not going to go into full dormancy information here because there's just too much info. I strongly recommend watching that dormancy video if you're serious about having a healthy Venus flytrap. The other thing I want to talk about real quick is just lighting. Full sun, guys, 100% full sun. Put it outside, not in a windowsill. These things need 10 to 14 hours of full sun a day. If you're going to put it in a windowsill, more than likely they're going to die because they're just not getting enough sun. Some people are lucky enough and they have an older windowsill that doesn't filter out light very well, and it does get that full sun all day. But the vast majority of people that put Venus flytraps in windowsills, it results in them dying not too long after. Sometimes it's even like a year after, because it's a slow death because they're just starved of light. If you're going to put them on the inside of your house, you absolutely want to put them either in a windowsill and then supplement them with a really strong grow light for another probably 6 to 8 hours after the sun goes down. That's a good way to do it. There are some good light suggestions I have. Again, there's a link in the description, the full care for a Venus flytrap, where I give some really good suggestions for lights. I also have some links in the description where I talk about some different lights that you can get to supplement for your Venus flytrap. But most important thing is either full sun outside all the time, or if you're going to have it indoors, you almost always have to supplement with an additional artificial light source for a healthy Venus flytrap. My highest recommendation is get these things outside during the summer and get them in full sun. They'll eat bugs, they'll be really happy, and that's where they will do the best. Alright, now let's talk about our Cephalotus plant here real quick. A lot of the care is actually really similar. Same thing, you're going to want a plastic planter. They also don't like the dissolved solids in their water or soil, so really important to have a plastic planter. We're also going to water these via a tray, so you want to make sure that you have your holes in the bottom for good drainage. So the only thing different with watering, you use the same water, distilled RO rainwater, no dissolved solids. The only difference is that we're just going to water these a little bit less than we are a Venus flytrap. You're going to let them go a little bit drier in between waterings. Where they grow naturally in Australia, they actually don't get very much water, so typically Cephalotus will talk to you with water. If they're getting watered perfectly, those pitchers are going to open wide open and they're going to be really, really healthy. If they're getting too much or too little water, sometimes those pitchers will stay closed, so they can be kind of tricky to diagnose sometimes when it comes to watering. But I like to let the tray go away, and it's usually probably, I don't know, a week or so in between waterings, like in the summer. Sometimes depending on if it's really, really super hot, I'll give them a little bit more, a little bit less, but you'll be able to kind of watch your Cephalotus. If those pitchers are opening up nice and wide, you're probably good to go. So for the bottom of this, I do the same thing. I put a paper towel on the bottom just for the same purposes, to make sure that there's no gaps in the bottom and to make sure that this can wick up the water that's needed all the time. I'm going to fill it at same thing, about halfway. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention real quick before I did that is they have a much shallower root system, so you can get away with a smaller pot for a Cephalotus if you want. This one's a small Cephalotus, so this planter should work well. You don't need it to be as deep because the roots don't grow down nearly as far as a Venus flytrap does. So this should be just fine for probably like a 4 to 6 inch pot or planter is perfect for a Cephalotus. All right, about halfway down, we're gonna pack. All packed down. Now let's go ahead and finish filling this up. There we go, filled to the top, packed it down just a little bit. We're gonna make a hole big enough for these roots to go down. So you can see the Cephalotus here, they have kind of funkier roots. They got some kind of big pieces and some white pieces. You can see this is actually a really healthy root system. It looks awesome, but they do have these bigger kind of almost like pieces of wood looking roots. And you wanna make sure and get all those down in the pot. So you can see I've opened up a fairly large hole here to make sure that we get all of these roots down in there. Go. And there we go. Got them buried up to about where the plants are starting to grow out at. I don't want to see a lot of roots here with the Cephalotus. I want to make sure that it's planted all the way to the top there. We don't want really any exposed roots or anything, but yeah, look at that. That looks really, really good. This is the nice green pitcher there that was way under the Venus flytraps. It's finally got some exposure now, so that's really cool. But yeah, there we go. So hoping that these completely take off for a Cephalotus. In terms of light, you're looking at actually probably pretty similar lighting conditions as a Venus flytrap. You probably can get away with a little bit less light. You do want to be careful putting these out in direct sun for too long. If it gets really hot, they do burn kind of easy. So I would put them in like maybe morning sun if it's really hot, and then maybe indirect afternoon sun. And if you're inside, I would say probably 8 to 10 hours with a grow light. They do like a lot of sun, but they can burn a little bit easier and quicker than a Venus flytrap can. The more sun you give them, the more purple the pictures will kind of change. You can see that one there on top is purple. Some of these newer, younger ones don't have any. They're just kind of green, but this one has been under a grow light in my tent, so it has been getting exposed to quite a bit of light. I have had some success with growing Cephalotus in a windowsill though, so I would say you have a better chance probably of growing a Cephalotus in a windowsill than you do a Venus flytrap. Venus flytrap, I say no way. Cephalotus, I say go ahead and give it a try. Make sure you're using distilled RO water. I think that's about it for Cephalotus. If you guys have any questions, throw your questions down in the comments. I love discussing with whether it's Venus flytrap or Cephalotus. I really love answering your questions and kind of getting in discussions with you. But thank you so much for being here. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel. That stuff helps me out so much, and I thank you for being here, and I really hope to catch you in my next video. Bye.